Imagine this. The greatest monuments on Earth, the pyramids of Giza, may not have been built by the Egyptians at all. The story we learn in school of tens of thousands of laborers dragging stones up ramps for a king's tomb might only be a convenient cover, because inside the pyramids lies a silence that defies explanation. No mummies, no treasures, no hieroglyphs, just vast chambers, perfectly cut passages, and granite blocks aligned with an impossible precision. Look closer and the mystery deepens. The Great Pyramid encodes the mathematical constants of pi and phi, and even mirrors the measurements of the Earth itself. The Sphinx, weathered not by desert winds but by heavy rains, seems to point back to an age when the Sahara was green, thousands of years before Egypt even existed. If this is true, then history isn't just incomplete. It has been rewritten. So who or what carved these mountains of stone? And why did they choose numbers, alignments, and silence as their message? The desert lies in silence. Evening falls on the Giza plateau, and the great stones turn gold in the sinking sun. The Sphinx gazes eastward, its face eroded, its body half buried in centuries of drifting sand. Behind it, the three pyramids rise in triangular perfection, their ancient angles aligned with the horizon, their shadows stretching across the desert floor. Tourists depart, the voices fade, and in the hush of twilight, the monuments seem to whisper their own story, one not written in hieroglyphs but in silence. For centuries, we have been told that these wonders were built by the Egyptians of the 4th dynasty. Pharaoh Khufu, they say, ordered his pyramid as a tomb around 2580 BCE, commanding thousands of workers to haul 2 million limestone blocks into place. His son Khafra raised the 2nd pyramid, and according to tradition carved the Sphinx in his own likeness. Textbooks present a tidy narrative: ramps, sledges, copper chisels, and the unyielding labor of a kingdom at its peak. It is a story of triumph, human will against stone, but the desert keeps its own memories. As we stand here watching the light fade, doubts rise like the evening wind. What if this story is incomplete? What if the Egyptians did not build the pyramids at all? This question, so radical and unsettling, has haunted scholars and seekers for generations. It is not born of fantasy alone, but of anomalies, details that refuse to fit the accepted script. Consider the Sphinx itself. Its weathered body, the enclosure carved deep into the bedrock, shows signs not of wind but of water. Heavy rains that last swept this land thousands of years before Egypt's pharaohs ruled. Or the pyramids, whose internal passages align with the stars in ways requiring an astronomy more advanced than any known Egyptian text suggests. Or the strange silence within their chambers. No hieroglyphs, no murals, no horary goods, nothing of the ritual pageantry that filled every other royal tomb. These puzzles invite us into a labyrinth of possibility. Could the pyramids be older than Egypt itself, inherited rather than built? Could they be the legacy of a forgotten civilization, one erased by time, climate, or deliberate design? The idea is controversial, even heretical, but it is precisely in the cracks of consensus that the most haunting mysteries dwell. The question is not trivial. If the Egyptians did not build the pyramids, the entire edifice of human history must be reconsidered. Our narrative of civilization, a steady climb from hunter-gatherer bands to kingdoms and empires, would collapse into something stranger. History would not be a ladder but a spiral, rising and falling, civilizations forgotten, knowledge lost and remembered in fragments. The pyramids would then stand not as the culmination of Egyptian genius, but as relics of a deeper cycle of human achievement. The evidence for this alternative view does not appear in a single place. It is scattered across disciplines: geology that speaks of rains in the desert, archaeology that reveals anomalies in construction, mythology that whispers of forgotten ages, genetics that hints at ancient populations erased from memory. Piece by piece, these clues form a shadow narrative, one that asks us to look beyond Egypt, beyond the comforting story of kings and tombs, into a past where memory itself was folded and hidden. Tonight our journey begins here at the edge of the desert, We will walk through stone and silence, through stele and scrolls, through myths and mathematics. We will hear voices beneath the earth, explore chambers sealed with copper doors, and follow the trail of legends that lead not only to Giza, but across the world. Each part of this journey will circle back to one haunting question. What if the Egyptians didn't build the pyramids? The twilight deepens. The last glow fades from the limestone. In this pause between day and night, we sense the weight of time, not just 4.5 millennia, but perhaps 10, 12, or even more. The pyramids endure, indifferent to the stories told about them, their stones watching as empires rise and fall, and as we listen closely we hear the silence, not as emptiness but as presence, a presence inviting us to look deeper, to ask again what we thought was settled. The Sphinx waits, the pyramids loom. Our path into mystery has only begun. Ahead lies geology, archaeology, myth and speculation, each pointing toward an origin story stranger than we've ever been taught. The desert sun rises, burning the horizon into gold. From afar the Sphinx looks eternal, as though it has always been there, crouching at the edge of the plateau, a sentinel to the pyramids. Tourists and guides often marvel at its enigmatic face, worn by millennia of time, its lion's body stretched across the sand. Yet for those who step closer, who peer into the enclosure that cradles the monument, another story emerges, one written not in hieroglyphs, but in scars. The limestone walls surrounding the Sphinx bear marks that defy the desert. They are not sharp-edged cuts like the work of chisels, nor horizontal striations, like the caress of wind-driven sand. Instead, the grooves run deep and vertical, their edges rounded, the surface weathered in soft curves. This is the handwriting of rain, rain heavy enough to fall for centuries, rain persistent enough to carve rock like water carves a canyon. And yet the plateau has known no such rainfall since long before the dawn of dynastic Egypt. In the early 1990s, geologist Robert Shaw from Boston University stood in that very enclosure, trained not as an Egyptologist, but as a reader of stone and climate. To his eyes, the evidence was unmistakable. The Sphinx showed signs of prolonged water erosion. This was not a matter of a few years of storms, nor of sudden floods, but of thousands of years of heavy, sustained rainfall, the kind of climate that last existed in this region more than 7,000 years ago, when the Sahara was still a savanna of rivers and lakes. If Shaw was right, then the Sphinx could not date to Khafra's reign in 2500 BCE. Its body had to have been carved much earlier, at least as far back as 5000 or 7000 BCE, and perhaps even earlier still. That means the Sphinx may have stood centuries, even millennia before the civilization we call Egypt emerged. Other scholars had seen the same scars, but Shaw gave them a voice. He pointed out the contrast between the Sphinx enclosure and nearby temples built of blocks cut from that same limestone bedrock. The blocks, later assembled by Old Kingdom Egyptians, show little water erosion. Their edges remain sharp, their surfaces relatively intact. The Sphinx, however, is deeply worn like an elder among children. The difference suggests that the Sphinx stood exposed for centuries of rain, while the temples were built much later, after the climate had already turned to desert. Of course, such a claim rattled the academic world. Egyptologists counted that the erosion might be caused by salt crystallization, groundwater rising and falling, or even sand abrasion over time. But Shaw was adamant. The rounded vertical weathering simply did not match those causes. He was not alone. Other geologists like Colin Rear examined the enclosure and reached similar conclusions. The Sphinx must be older than the orthodox timeline allows. The idea was met with fierce resistance. After all, to admit the Sphinx was thousands of years older would mean rewriting the history of civilization itself. According to conventional archaeology, humans in 7000 BCE were still scattered farmers and hunter-gatherers, not master builders capable of carving a monument 73 meters long from solid bedrock. The implications were staggering. If the Sphinx predates Egypt, then it may have been built by a forgotten culture, one advanced enough to command stone on a monumental scale. Imagine then the world in which the Sphinx was born. The Sahara was not the endless desert we know, but a lush grassland where rivers coursed and lakes glittered. Rock paintings from that period, found deep in the desert, depict giraffes, elephants, crocodiles, and even people swimming in rivers. It was a world alive, fertile, green. In such an environment, a people may have thrived, leaving behind no texts, no written names, but one colossal guardian carved in stone. The Sphinx itself bears other mysteries. Its head is disproportionately small compared to its body, leading some researchers to suggest it was recarved at some point in history. If true, the original may have borne the visage of a lion or another symbolic creature, its face later reshaped into that of a pharaoh. This would explain why its features do not match Khafra's statue with precision, why its head seems oddly undersized, almost like an afterthought. The Egyptians may have inherited an ancient monument and then reshaped it to fit their own narratives. The evidence deepens when we look at the surrounding landscape. Geological surveys show that much of northern Africa experienced dramatic climate shifts around 10,000 BCE. During the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to cold and aridity was followed by an equally sudden rebound into warmth and rain. Torrential storms swept the land, transforming the Sahara into grassland, and then millennia later into desert once again. If the Sphinx was exposed to those rains, its age may stretch back not 4,500 years, but 9,000 or more. Such a possibility resonates with myths worldwide, stories of cataclysm, floods, and civilizations erased. The scars on the Sphinx may be geological echoes of those events, carved not into parchment, but into stone. Even skeptics find the anomaly difficult to dismiss entirely. Egypt's official timeline explains the pyramids and temples, but the Sphinx stubbornly resists. It is a hybrid, lion and human, guardian and enigma, half buried, half eroded. Its scars whisper of skies the Egyptians never saw, rains that never fell in their lifetimes. Walk once more around the enclosure. Let your hand brush the stone. Feel the grooves softened by water long vanished, curving like the bed of a forgotten stream. Close your eyes and the desert transforms. You can almost hear thunder in the distance. Smell the wet earth after rain. The Sphinx does not belong to the Egypt of sand and pharaohs, but to an older world, one drowned in memory. The Egyptians, meticulous in their records, did not claim to have built the Sphinx. Instead, their own stele describe it as ancient, buried, needing restoration. They approached it not as creators, but as heirs. And if the Sphinx was already old in their time, then what does that say of the pyramids rising beside it? The desert sun climbs higher, bleaching the limestone to pale fire. The Sphinx gazes forward, its eyes eroded but enduring. Its body is scarred by rain that has not fallen for thousands of years. It is a monument out of time, a survivor from an age we are only beginning to rediscover. The water scars remind us that history is not fixed. It shifts like climate, erode us like stone, leaving traces for those willing to see. The Sphinx is not simply a statue. It is a geological document, a witness to a world erased, and its testimony leads us deeper still toward the greatest monument of all, whose silence inside raises questions louder than any words. Night gathers on the Giza plateau, and the Great Pyramid towers above the desert like a black silhouette against the stars. It is vast, immutable, its lines crisp even after millennia. Yet within this mountain of stone lies not grandeur, not treasures, not the golden afterlife promised to kings, but silence. And it is this silence, more than any inscription or artifact, that unsettles us. Step inside, the temperature cools, the noise of the world fades, and the air grows heavy with stillness. The corridors slope upward and downward, cut with sharp precision through limestone and granite. You pass into the king's chamber, and there it stands, a granite box often called a sarcophagus. It sits empty, lidless, mute. Its surface bears no carving, no name, no spell to guide a soul. Around it the walls are bare, no hieroglyphs, no murals, no painted gods welcoming a pharaoh into eternity. Compare this with the Valley of the Kings, where royal tombs overflowed with color and treasure. Tutankhamun's tomb held more than 5,000 objects. Golden chariots, jewelry, weapons, games, even food for the journey. Inscriptions lined the walls. Prayers to Osiris and Ra. Every detail cried out the king's name. Yet here, in the largest structure ever raised by human hands, there is nothing. No treasure, no body, not even a cart. The silence is absolute. Archaeologists long explained this absence by claiming the pyramid was looted. Yet looting leaves scars, shattered jars, scraps of gold, fragments of bone. The Great Pyramid offers none. The chamber is pristine, as if designed to be empty. Letters did not take the inscriptions from the walls. They did not erase the cartes. The silence was always there. This emptiness may itself be the message. It whispers that the Great Pyramid was not a tomb. Its architecture supports this suspicion. The Grand Gallery, a soaring corridor with corbelled walls rising to a dizzying height, looks less like Ereri passage than a piece of machinery. A structure built for function, not ceremony. The descending passage plunges into the bedrock, ending in a rough chamber known as unfinished, as though it were part of a plan left incomplete. The Queen's chamber, smaller and oddly placed, is fitted with shafts that stretch upward and outward. Too small for human passage, too precise to be random. What purpose did these serve, if not ventilation? Why carve them at all? Then there is the alignment. The Great Pyramid is oriented almost perfectly to true north, deviating by only a fraction of a degree. Its base is leveled to within centimeters across 13 acres. Each side once mirrored the others to near perfection. This is surveying precision that rivals modern methods. Later pyramids are crude imitations, collapsing, misaligned, poorly executed. The Great Pyramid was not the start of an experiment. It was a singular pinnacle, as if inherited, fully formed from knowledge already perfected. Inside the king's chamber, the granite box resonates when struck, its sound filling the chamber with a deep humming tone. Some researchers believe this was intentional, part of an acoustic design that amplifies sound and vibration. Others note the use of Aswan granite, heavy with quartz capable of electric effects under pressure. Was the pyramid more than a monument? Was it a machine, a kind of resonant structure interacting with earth and sky? The silence of the pyramid becomes eloquent in this light. Its emptiness may not be absence but instruction. It tells us to look at the stone itself, at the dimensions, the alignments, the geometry. Unlike inscriptions that can be forgotten, numbers endure. The pyramid's silence is not a void, it is a code. Egyptologists often cite the quarry marks in the so-called relieving chambers above the king's chamber. Crude hieroglyphs naming Khufu as proof of ownership. Yet even these are debated. Were they authentic graffiti from work crews, or later additions meant to cement a narrative? The marks appear in spaces inaccessible without dismantling the pyramid. Spaces first entered in the 19th century by explorers using explosives. Their authenticity remains uncertain, but even if real, they prove only that Egyptians repaired or modified the structure, not that they built it from the ground up. Imagine Khufu, not as the architect of the Great Pyramid, but as its inheritor. He finds a monument already ancient, claims it as his own, and orders additions or restorations. To posterity. His name becomes fused with the pyramid, but the stones themselves remain silent, unyielding to every story imposed upon them. This silence forces us to reconsider history. Could a people long before Egypt have built this structure, encoding their knowledge into stone? Could the Egyptians have found it, puzzled over it, and claimed it? If so, then the Great Pyramid is not merely older than we think. It is a survivor of a forgotten epoch, a message from builders whose names are lost. As you stand in the king's chamber, the silence feels alive. It presses against the skin as if waiting for recognition. The granite box hums faintly at a touch, as though still holding energy. The chamber's air feels heavy, charged. Perhaps this is why no pharaoh was buried here, because it was never meant for one. Step back into the desert night. The pyramid rises behind you, vast and impenetrable, its apex pointing to the stars. The silence within continues to echo, challenging the story written in textbooks. It invites you to see the pyramid not as a tomb, but as a question, one that refuses to be answered. And yet not all clues are hidden in silence. Some appear openly carved into stone slabs left by later dynasties. Slabs that tell us something astonishing, that even the Egyptians themselves admitted they did not build these monuments. If this journey intrigues you, if the silence of the stones has stirred your imagination, consider subscribing to join us again and tell me, where are you listening from tonight and at what time? The sun sets over Giza, casting long shadows across the plateau. Tourists move away, but in the Cairo Museum, hidden in quiet halls among thousands of artifacts, rests a small slab of limestone that could rewrite everything we think we know about the pyramids. At first glance, it is unremarkable. Chipped edges, faded hieroglyphs, no golden glow, no towering size. Yet this humble stone, known as the inventory stela, carries words that challenge the very foundation of Egyptology. It was unearthed in 1858 by Auguste Marot, a French archaeologist who had spent years exploring the sands of Egypt near the Sphinx. While excavating the temple ruins, his team discovered the slab. At the time, it seemed like another inscription to catalogue, another line in the growing library of Egypt's past. But when translated, its message proved anything but ordinary. The inventory stela does not proclaim Khufu, the fourth dynasty pharaoh, as the builder of the Great Pyramid or the Sphinx. Instead, it describes him as a restorer. It records that Khufu found the Sphinx already standing, partially buried in sand, an ancient monument in need of renewal. It goes further, suggesting that Khufu raised temples to honor the Sphinx, and that the statue was already tied to the goddess Isis, mistress of the pyramid. This claim directly contradicts the orthodox timeline. According to textbooks, Khufu built the Great Pyramid around 2580 BCE, and his son Khafra commissioned the Sphinx. But the stela implies both monuments predate Khufu's reign, possibly by centuries, possibly by millennia. If true, it means Egypt's most iconic structures were not creations of the Old Kingdom, but inheritances. Egyptologists quickly pushed back. They argued the stela was carved in the 26th dynasty, over 2,000 years after Khufu. They dismissed it as a pious fraud, a piece of late propaganda designed to connect later priests to the sacred monuments of the past. In their eyes, it was not evidence of history, but of myth-making. And yet problems remain with that dismissal. Why would scribes invent a story that diminished Khufu, portraying him not as a mighty builder, but as someone who stumbled upon older ruins? Egyptian tradition glorified its kings. It celebrated their power, their ability to raise monuments, to commune with gods. To paint Khufu as a mere restorer was not flattery. It was humility, almost embarrassment. The text feels less like invention and more like memory. The stela also links the Sphinx with Isis, a goddess of rebirth and magic, but rarely associated with the monument in mainstream Egyptian religion. Why connect Isis here unless it preserved an old occult tradition, one that saw the Sphinx as part of a mystery already ancient by Khufu's day? This unusual attribution suggests that by the time of the 26th dynasty, the Sphinx's original identity had been forgotten, folded into Egypt's mythic framework in the only way they could understand. Critics point to the stela's damaged condition, noting that parts are broken and its provenance uncertain. But fragments of truth often survive in imperfect forms, and sometimes the most controversial pieces are the ones dismissed most quickly. The very eagerness to cast it aside raises suspicion. Why does a single stela, if unimportant, provoke such discomfort? Let us imagine the scene as the stela describes it. Khufu, great in power, walks across the plateau. Before him the Sphinx lies half-buried, its body swallowed by sand, its face worn by rains long past. Around it, ruins of earlier temples crumble. Khufu does not command his people to carve the lion body from bedrock. He commands them to clear, to restore, to honor. He builds his pyramid nearby, not to create a wonder from nothing, but to place himself in the shadow of something already greater. If this image is true, then Egypt's kings were heirs to a legacy they did not fully understand. They draped the monuments in their own mythology, claimed them with offerings and inscriptions, but they did not build them. The pyramids and the Sphinx became like gods whose origins were forgotten. Eternal presences folded into Egypt's identity, even as their true makers vanished into silence. The inventory stela is rarely displayed, rarely discussed. In textbooks it receives only a footnote, a curiosity brushed aside. Yet for those who pause to read its words, it resonates with all we have already seen. The water erosion on the Sphinx that speaks of ancient rains, the silence of the Great Pyramid's chambers that refuse to be tombs, the absence of inscriptions where they should abound. It is another fragment of a puzzle scattered across time. Consider how many such fragments may have been lost, scrolls burned, steely shattered oral traditions fading into myth. The inventory stela survived by chance, a single stone dug from sand. It carries not a full story but a whisper, and whispers repeated across centuries become the foundation of hidden truths. Even its name is telling. Inventory suggests a list, a record of temples and offerings. Yet hidden in that inventory is a revelation that Khufu himself acknowledged monuments older than his reign. In its dry bureaucratic tone lies a message explosive enough to topple the accepted history of the pyramids. The stela's silence in popular discourse mirrors the silence of the pyramid itself. Both are absences that speak loudly, if we are willing to listen. The Great Pyramid offers no hieroglyphs. The stela offers words that scholars wish to ignore. Between the two lies a chasm in our understanding, a gap where another civilization's memory may reside. As you stand before the small limestone slab in the museum, surrounded by more flamboyant treasures, you sense its quiet defiance. It does not glitter. It does not dominate the room. Yet its meaning is more radical than gold. It tells us that even the Egyptians, the supposed builders of these wonders, remembered themselves as restorers, not creators. They inherited the plateau just as we have inherited their myths, the inventory. Stela is a key chipped and weathered, but still turning in the lock of history. It does not open the door entirely, but it hints that the door exists. And through its faint crack of light, we glimpse a world older than pharaohs, older than dynasties, older than Egypt itself. Next we turn to another stone between the paws of the Sphinx, the dream stele, where a young prince hears the voice of the monument itself, begging to be freed from the sands of time. The desert drifts endlessly, and sand has always been both guardian and enemy of the Sphinx. It preserves by burying, but in doing so it suffocates. For centuries, perhaps millennia, the colossal lion body of the monument lay hidden beneath dunes, leaving only the enigmatic head visible above the desert floor. Imagine approaching the plateau in that time. No sweeping view of paws or tail, no grandeur stretching across 70 meters of bedrock, only a head rising from the sands, mysterious and aloof. It was here around 400 BCE that a young prince of Egypt came to rest in the shadow of that half-buried face. His name was Thutmose, not yet a king, not yet destined for the throne. History remembers him as Thutmose Thor, but in this moment he was merely a man weary from the hunt, seeking shelter from the sun. The Sphinx's head, weathered and eroded, loomed above him, its expression already softened by time. He lay down in its shadow and drifted into sleep. In that dream the Sphinx spoke. Its voice was not thunderous but weary, muffled as though buried alive. It pleaded for freedom. The sand has risen to my throat. My body is heavy with silence. Clear me and I will give you kingship. The prince awoke shaken. The dream seared into his mind. Dreams in Egypt were not taken lightly. They were considered communications with gods. And here was a god in stone offering him a bargain. Thutmose obeyed. He ordered the sand cleared, revealing the Sphinx's body once again. He restored temples at its sides and raised offerings to honor the guardian who had promised him power. Against expectation, he rose to the throne just as the dream foretold. To commemorate this pact, He carved his experience into stone and placed it between the paws of the Sphinx. That slab still standing today is the dream stele. The inscription is remarkable for several reasons. It does not describe the Sphinx as newly built, nor as the proud creation of Khafre or any other pharaoh. Instead, it describes the Sphinx as something neglected, forgotten, already swallowed by sand. Its tone is not triumphant but plaintive, an admission that even in the 18th dynasty, the origins of the Sphinx were obscure. To the Egyptians of Thutmose's time, the monument was ancient, older than memory, older even than myth. This raises troubling questions. If Khafre had indeed carved the Sphinx only 800 years earlier, why would it already have been forgotten? Egyptian culture was meticulous in preserving the names of its kings and monuments. Temples older than the Sphinx were maintained. Statues were revered. Cults were renewed. Why would the largest statue in Egypt, supposedly the pride of the Old Kingdom, fall into neglect so swiftly? Unless, of course, Khafre was not its builder. Unless the Sphinx was already old when he reigned, its original identity lost. Its true purpose buried in time. The dream stele itself tells us more. Its upper portion is broken, fragments lost to history. Scholars have long speculated about what might have been inscribed there. Some suggest it once contained details of the Sphinx's origins, perhaps even the name of its original builders. If so, then the most important lines were deliberately erased, leaving only the part that justified Thutmose's kingship. What remains is politics, a divine mandate for a man who was not expected to rule. What was lost may have been history, erased either by time or by intent. Look closely at the imagery. The stele depicts Thutmose standing before the Sphinx, offering libations. The monument is already presented as divine, a god incarnate in stone. Its name in the inscription is Horus in the horizon, a title emphasizing not its maker, but its eternal gaze eastward to the rising sun. This name reinforces the idea that by the 18th dynasty, the Egyptians no longer knew its origin. They had absorbed it into their pantheon instead. Modern Egyptologists often frame the dream stele as propaganda, a way for Thutmose to legitimize his unexpected claim to the throne. Certainly it served that function, but propaganda works best when it resonates with existing belief. If the Sphinx was already seen as ancient, already mysterious, then the dream fits seamlessly into cultural expectations. The people would have accepted it not as invention, but as revelation. The stele, therefore, preserves not only a political maneuver, but a cultural truth that the Sphinx's origins were already forgotten. Even for the Egyptians themselves, the monument belonged to another age. They did not record its construction because they could not. They only recorded their encounters with it as dreamers, restorers, worshippers. Imagine walking between the Sphinx's paws today. The dream stele stands upright, weathered by millennia. Its hieroglyphs faint but still legible. Tourists pass it quickly, often unaware of its meaning, seeing only another inscribed slab among many. Yet if you pause, if you listen, its words echo with the same mystery that stirred Thutmose's dream. It tells us that the Sphinx was ancient even then, its body suffocating beneath sand, its origin already erased from memory. This pattern of monuments inherited, restored, reimagined, appears again and again. The inventory stela described Khufu as a restorer. The dream stele describes Thutmose as a restorer. Neither claims creation. Both suggest that Egypt's kings found the Sphinx, as we find it now, eroded, enigmatic, already older than anyone could say. The implications are immense. If the Sphinx predates Egypt, then who carved it? Was it the same civilization hinted at in myths of floods and lost ages? Was it the same culture that may have encoded cosmic numbers into the Great Pyramid? Or was it built by a people we have no name for? A population erased by climate shifts that turned fertile savilvanas into the Sahara? The dream stele does not answer these questions. Instead, it deepens them. It folds memory into silence, hinting that even in ancient times the Sphinx was already a riddle. And in that riddle lies the possibility that our entire timeline of civilization is incomplete. Stand there in the desert night, the Sphinx looming above, the dream steely glinting faintly in torchlight. The words carved 3,000 years ago still speak, not of triumph, but of neglect, restoration, and mystery. The voice of the Sphinx calls out across time, "Free me from the sand, and I will give you kingship." Perhaps that promise was not only for Thutmose, but for us, an invitation to uncover the truth if we dare. And if the Sphinx was already ancient, what then of the Great Pyramid rising behind it? Within its perfect geometry lies another kind of message, not carved in words, but in numbers, ratios, and cosmic alignments. Stand at the base of the Great Pyramid and lift your eyes. The sheer face rises above you like a mountain, 146 miss, once capped in gleaming white limestone. At first glance it is simply immense, 2.5 million blocks, stacked with unyielding patience. But to those who measure, who calculate, who listen to the language of numbers, the pyramid reveals a different truth. It is not just a structure. It is an equation carved into stone. Start with the base. Each side, when intact, measured 230.4 m together. The four sides create a perimeter of 921.6 m. Divide that by its original height, 146.6 m, and you arrive at 6,283. That number is not arbitrary. It is 2 to pi, the constant that defines the circle. Imagine the pyramid's square base as Earth's surface, its height as the radius. In this monument, circle and square unite, the geometry of heaven encoded in stone on Earth. Look next at its slope, about 51/84. This angle produces a ratio that approximates the golden number, Fi 1.618, 618. The ratio of beauty and growth, of spirals in shells, of leaves on branches, of galaxies in their cosmic arms. Phi is not human invention. It is universal. The pyramid embodies it, not in theory but in living limestone. Then consider scale. Multiply the pyramid's height by 43s and 200, and you approximate Earth's polar radius, 6,356 kilometers. Multiply the perimeter by the same number, and you reach 40,030 kilometers, Earth's equatorial circumference. The scaling factor 43,200 is not random either. It is tied to the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that takes about 20 years to complete a cycle. Divide that cycle by 600, and you have 43,200. The pyramid seems to speak in planetary terms, as if it is not only a monument to a king, but a model of Earth itself. How could the builders have known these constants? Egyptologists argue coincidence. After all, measure enough ratios and some will appear significant. But coincidence strains under repetition. Pi Phi, Earth's radius, Earth's circumference, precessional cycles all embedded together, all in one structure, all aligned with stellar precision. At some point, coincidence ceases to be chance and becomes intention. The pyramid's alignment deepens the mystery. Its sides face the cardinal points of the compass with uncanny accuracy within 360ths of a degree. Even today, surveyors would struggle to achieve this on such scale. The base is leveled to within centimeters across more than 5 hectares of desert floor. The difference in length between the longest and shortest sides is mere millim. How did copper tools and ropes achieve this? Or was a different knowledge at work, one lost to us but preserved in stone? Step inside and the geometry continues. The king's chamber, built entirely of granite from Aswan, nearly 900 kilometers away, resonates with sound at specific frequencies. Its dimensions are not random. 10.47 mx, 5.24 mx, 5.2 emits. They reflect harmonic ratios as though tuned like an instrument. The Grand Gallery, a soaring corridor 46-minute long, 86-minute high, narrows as it ascends, channeling movement and perhaps sound. The so-called Queen's Chamber lies lower, with shafts pointing towards stars. Not wide enough for air, but precise enough for alignment. The design seems lesser airy, more functional, like components of a vast machine. This is not how Egyptians buried their dead. Tombs were filled with inscriptions, with treasures, with prayers to ensure eternal life. The Great Pyramid holds none. Instead, its language is mathematics. Its script geometry, its subject the cosmos. If this is a tomb, it is a tomb that speaks in numbers, not words. What purpose could such encoding serve? Perhaps it was memory meant to preserve knowledge through catastrophe. Imagine a civilization that foresaw its collapse through drought, flood, or fire. They could write on papyrus, but papyrus burns. They could carve myths, but myths twist. Instead, they chose stone, enduring as mountains. They embedded knowledge in ratios and constants, knowing that numbers are eternal. To rediscover them is to converse with builders across time. Consider to the tradition of sacred geometry worldwide. In India, temples encode cosmological proportions in their layouts. In Mesoamerica, the Pyramid of the Sun aligns with solstices. In Britain, Stonehenge aligns with the midsummer sunrise. Across continents, ancient builders seemed obsessed with sky and number. The Great Pyramid is their masterpiece, a summit of geometry written at planetary scale. Skeptics argue the Egyptians were simply excellent engineers, that they discovered pi and phi empirically, without abstract theory. But this raises another problem. If they had such knowledge, why does it vanish after the Fourth Dynasty? Later pyramids are crude imitations, misaligned, collapsing, stripped of perfection. The Great Pyramid is not the culmination of a slow climb. It appears fully formed, as if dropped whole into history, unmatched before or after. This anomaly suggests inheritance. The Egyptians may have claimed the pyramid, inscribed Khufu's name in hidden chambers, but they did not design its geometry. They inherited it like the Sphinx from a past too distant to remember. They saw its grandeur, claimed it as theirs, and wove it into their mythology. But the numbers embedded in stone betray another origin, one beyond the Nile, beyond Egypt, perhaps beyond even the civilization we know. Step again into the king's chamber. Strike the granite box. The note lingers, deep and resonant, vibrating through your chest. There it is, as though the stone is alive, tuned to the same language as the pyramid's dimensions. Mathematics and resonance intertwine here, whispering that function, notary ritual was the builder's goal. The pyramid's silence then is not empty. It is filled with numbers, with proportions, with a code universal across time and space. It does not say, "I am Khufu's tomb." It says, "This is the earth, this is the sky. This is the measure of the cosmos." The sun sets beyond the plateau, the pyramid glowing faintly in twilight. Its stones radiate patience, waiting for us to notice what they have always said. And as darkness falls, the desert quiets, leaving the pyramid to stand alone, not as a tomb, but as a message etched into geometry for those willing to listen. But if numbers reveal that the pyramids were more than tombs, what of the hidden spaces beneath them? For below the plateau, in darkness and secrecy, lie chambers and tunnels that speak not only of geometry, but of voices deliberately concealed. Beneath the blazing sun, the Giza plateau looks barren, its monument standing above a flat, wind-swept plain. But below the surface lies another story. Hidden chambers, shafts, and tunnels have been whispered about for centuries, forming a shadow map of a world beneath the pyramids. The stones above speak in silence. The earth below seems to murmur secrets it refuses to release. One of the most enigmatic of these features is the Osiris shaft. Located near the causeway of Khafra's pyramid, it plunges 30 meters into the limestone bedrock. Descend its levels, and you pass from narrow corridors into chambers carved with a precision equal to the pyramids above. At the deepest level, a granite box sits in the center, often called a sarcophagus. Yet, like the granite box in the king's chamber, it bears no inscriptions, no signs of burial. The walls are smooth, the acoustics uncanny. Whispers carry in strange clarity while loud sounds seem muffled. It is less a tomb than a resonant chamber designed for a function lost to us. Reports of subterranean structures extend far beyond the Osiris shaft. During Napoleon's expedition in 1798, scholars mapped corridors and rooms beneath the plateau, suggesting a network that linked the pyramids and the Sphinx. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, explorers described catacombs, stairways, and sealed passages stretching under Giza. Some accounts claimed vast caverns with ceilings high enough to echo like cathedrals. Yet these maps and journals, though consistent, were dismissed as exaggerations, folded into the margins of history. Modern technology has reopened the question. In 2008, ground-penetrating radar surveys revealed anomalies beneath the plateau, voids, geometric cavities, regular shapes inconsistent with natural fissures. Beneath the Sphinx, the scans showed hollows suggestive of chambers. Beneath the Great Pyramid, they detected uncharted spaces disconnected from known passages. Photographs from some of these explorations show cut stone walls, crude steps, and archways deep underground. But soon after, access was restricted, explanations vague. Officials declared there is nothing there, even as the data whispered otherwise. Why the silence? Why the denial? If the subterranean world beneath Giza is mundane, why seal it away? The pattern mirrors what we have seen before. Discoveries that threaten the orthodox story are quickly buried, either by sand or by bureaucracy. The plateau above is accessible to millions. The plateau below is locked behind gates. The idea of a hidden network is not unique to Egypt. In Malta, the hypogeum of Halaflini extends underground in 3 levels of carved chambers, its acoustics resonating at low frequencies. In Turkey, Daringu tunnels descend into the earth vast enough to shelter tens of thousands. If such subterranean worlds exist elsewhere, why not at Giza? Perhaps the Egyptians, or those before them, carved not only monuments to the sky, but labyrinths beneath the sand, spaces of ritual, resonance, or preservation. Imagine the purpose. If the pyramids encoded cosmic knowledge in stone, might the chambers beneath preserve something else? Texts, artifacts, or technologies? Mystics like Edgar Cayce spoke of a hall of records buried under the Sphinx, a repository of wisdom from a lost civilization, perhaps Atlantis. Such claims are dismissed as fantasy, yet the physical anomalies beneath the plateau remain unexplained. The stones above shout their presence, the chambers below whisper their denial. Both seem designed to endure, to outlast memory, to wait for a future that might listen. As we descend into this underground enigma, we feel the weight of folded time. The walls are damp with silence, the air heavy with secrecy. Voices seem to echo from the stone, as if knowledge itself has been inmed. And then deeper still, we come to something stranger. Sealed doors, copper pins, and shafts too small for human entry. Features that hint at deliberate concealment, as though the builders wanted their secrets hidden. Not just from time, but from us. The corridors grow narrower. The air turns close, heavy, with a silence that seems alive. In 1993, this silence was broken by the whirring wheels of a small robot named Upwa 2, opener of the ways. Built by German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink, it was designed to crawl where no human could. The narrow shafts branching from the Queen's chamber inside the Great Pyramid. Each passage was only about 20 centimeters wide, too small for a person, too smooth for erosion, too deliberate to be dismissed as accident. As the robot crept upward, its camera revealed shafts that stretched with mathematical precision, their limestone walls polished as if by invisible hands. For more than 60 meno, it climbed steadily until the light fell upon something no one expected. A stone slab blocking the end of the passage. The slab was perfectly fitted, sealed tight. Embedded in it were 2 small copper pins protruding like rivets, glinting in the robot's light. This was not the broken end of a tunnel. It was a door. The discovery stunned the world. Why would the builders carve shafts with such precision, only to seal them with stone doors no one could pass through? Egyptologists had long assumed these shafts were symbolic. Air shafts meant to let the pharaoh's soul ascend to the stars. But symbols do not require copper pins. Symbols do not require sealed doors. The evidence suggested design, intention, secrecy. Just as the mystery deepened, the investigation was halted. Gantenbrink's contract was terminated. His access revoked by the Supreme Council of Antiquities. Officially, the robot had exceeded its purpose of ventilation. Unofficially, the timing was uncanny. Just as the shaft revealed its secret, the project was shut down. For nearly a decade, the door remained unopened. In 2002, another robot, the Pyramid rover, was sent to finish the task. Live television promised the world would finally glimpse what lay beyond. The rover drilled a small hole through the slab, inserted a fiber optic camera, and beamed back the first images. The world held its breath. On the screen appeared another chamber, small, smooth, and utterly empty. And at the far end of that chamber stood a second stone slab, sealed just as perfectly, waiting like a guardian behind the first. No inscriptions, no artifacts, just silence. A door behind a door. What was the purpose of this architectural riddle? Some speculated it might conceal the fabled Hall of Records, a library of lost knowledge. Others suggested it was part of a mechanism, a resonance chamber, a time capsule, or even a system to keep intruders from what lies deeper still. The copper pins hammered flat seemed less decorative than symbolic, as if marking a threshold not to be crossed. But once again exploration ceased. No further attempt was made to pierce the second slab. The shafts remain sealed. Official explanations are sparse. The chambers are symbolic, the doors insignificant. Yet the precision of their construction argues otherwise. Why build shafts aligned with stars, carve them smooth, seal them with doors, embed copper pins, all for nothing? The unanswered question lingers. What lies beyond? A hidden chamber of knowledge? A mechanism designed to remain silent until a future age, or perhaps nothing at all? A message not in what the doors conceal, but in the fact that they exist. The pyramids do not yield their secrets easily. Their builders seem to anticipate intrusion, designing not only grandeur but resistance. Stone conceals stone, chambers fold into silence. Every discovery is answered not with clarity, but with another layer of mystery. And if shafts can hold sealed doors, if passages lead to silence, what else might have been hidden? There are whispers of a manuscript, a scroll that described pyramids built before Egypt itself, a text that could have rewritten history had it not been consumed by fire. Picture Cairo in the 19th century, the streets alive with merchants, the scent of spices drifting through the air, and European collectors moving quietly from monastery to market, seeking relics of a past that seemed to stretch endlessly beneath the sands. It was in this climate of discovery that a story emerged of a fragile manuscript, a scroll kept safe for generations by Coptic monks. Its words, if true, could have changed everything we believe about the pyramids. The manuscript, written in Sahidic Coptic, was said to preserve fragments of an older tradition. It described the pyramids not as tombs, nor as the works of the pharaohs, but as beacons of stone raised before language itself, before the Nile carved its present path, before the birth of Egypt. The scroll spoke of 3 structures aligned to the stars, meant not to house the dead but to guard memory. They were called vaults of knowledge, repositories built to endure the collapse of a world already fading. The collector who acquired the manuscript, his name uncertain, Austrian or French, the details blurred by time, brought it to Europe for translation. Linguists prepared to decode its layered script, historians eager to match its phrases to the monuments of Giza. But before the work could begin, tragedy struck. The scroll, along with much of the collector's library, was destroyed in a fire. Some say the blaze consumed a private study. Others claim it spread through an archive in Vienna or Lyon. The details shift like smoke. All that remains are second-hand reports. A letter quoting a monk who said, "They were built before words, before the river knew its place." Skeptics argue the story was a misunderstanding, or worse, a forgery. The 19th century was rife with fabricated relics sold to eager Europeans. Yet the peculiar phrasing lingers before words, before the river knew its place. These are not the boasts of propaganda. They sound more like echoes of geology, of prehistory, of a memory so distant it had to be veiled in metaphor. Geological studies confirmed that the Nile's course has shifted over millennia, that its great delta only stabilized around 4000 BCE. If the scroll placed the pyramids before this, it pointed to an origin deep in prehistory. The pattern is haunting. How often has knowledge surfaced only to be lost again? The Library of Alexandria burned. Mayan codices destroyed by conquistadors. Tablets shattered. Inscriptions effaced. Now a Coptic scroll vanished in flames at the very moment it could have spoken. History does not only forget, it is erased. And yet even in absence, the scroll's ghost remains. The idea it carried, that the pyramids were not born with Egypt but inherited from an older civilization, fits with what we have already seen. The Sphinx weathered by ancient rains, the silence of the king's chamber, the inventory and dream steel. It is as if scattered fragments across time keep pointing to the same conclusion. Like broken pieces of a map we are forbidden to assemble. Imagine holding that brittle manuscript, its ink fading, its fibers fragile. Imagine reading words that shifted the horizon of history. Then imagine watching it burn, reduced to ash before its truth could be heard. In that silence, the pyramids loom larger, their stones whispering what the scroll could not. The flames may have consumed the text, but they could not extinguish the question. Who built the pyramids if not the Egyptians? And if such knowledge was truly preserved, perhaps elsewhere in myth or memory, where else might we look for answers? The Greeks told of Atlantis, a civilization destroyed in a single night, its knowledge lost to flood and fire. Could the pyramids be its echo? Or do they belong to another forgotten world, erased from history but remembered in stone? The night deepens, and we step beyond Egypt into the realm of memory dressed as myth. For when the stones are silent and the scrolls are ash, it is in legend that fragments of truth sometimes linger. Across cultures, across millennia, we find tales of civilizations that rose to brilliance and then vanished, leaving behind only whispers. Whispers that feel uncannily like the shadows cast by the pyramids themselves. Begin with Plato, around 360 BCE. He recorded the tale of Atlantis in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias. He described a powerful civilization that flourished 9,000 years before his time. An island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, whose people were masters of architecture, navigation, and astronomy. In a single night and day, catastrophe consumed them. Earthquakes, floods, the sea swallowing their cities whole. Scholars often dismiss it as allegory, a parable about hubris. Yet the timeline Plato gives, roughly 11,600 years ago, coincides with the end of the Younger Deuce, a period of sudden climate upheaval when ice sheets melted, seas rose and storms raged across the world. Myth and geology fold together, hinting that Atlantis may be less fiction than memory. The Egyptians themselves told Plato the story. According to him, priests at Sais preserved records of a civilization far older than Greece, a civilization destroyed but remembered. If they spoke of Atlantis, were they also hinting at monuments on their own soil that predated their pharaohs? Monuments like the pyramids and the Sphinx, whose origins were already obscure in their time. Beyond Greece, other myths echo the same pattern. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh recounts a great flood that erased the world, sparing only fragments of human knowledge. In Hindu texts, the Mahabharata speaks of lost cities with technologies so advanced they sound like science fiction, flying machines, weapons of light. In Mesoamerica, the Pop Vu recalls earlier creations, worlds destroyed and remade before the present one. Each myth is different, but the rhythm is the same. A great civilization falls, its memory erased, its wisdom buried. Geology supports these echoes. The African humid period ended abruptly around 4000 BCE, transforming the Sahara from grassland to desert. Rock art from that time depicts boats, cattle, and rivers where only sand now lies. Doggerland, once connecting Britain to Europe, sank beneath rising seas. Sunderland in Southeast Asia shrank to the islands we now know as Indonesia. Entire landscapes once inhabited were swallowed. If humans built monuments there, their ruins now lie drowned. Could the pyramids belong to this cycle? The legacy of a forgotten global culture swept away by flood and drought. Their precision, their astronomical alignments, their silence, all seem to fit the pattern of a people who knew their world was ending and carved knowledge into stone to survive them. The Egyptians may have inherited these relics and woven them into their dynastic story, just as other cultures were ruins into their myths. This possibility makes the pyramids not just Egyptian wonders, but global ones. Their stones resonate with Atlantis, with Gilgamesh, with the drowned plains of Doggerland and the lost islands of the Pacific. They remind us that memory is fragile, that civilizations rise like waves and crash into silence, leaving behind fragments for future generations to puzzle over. And if myths are fragments, then perhaps the stones are their anchors, tangible proofs of stories too vast to dismiss. The pyramids stand as if to say, yes, something was here older than you know, older than your language. We built not for glory, but for remembrance. The transition is clear. If Giza's monuments share their essence with global myths, then we must compare them to global stones. Across the world, megaliths rise. Baalbek in Lebanon, Pumapunku in Bolivia, Göbekli in Turkey, each whispering of skills too advanced, each resisting the stories told about them. Together they form a chorus, a scattered testimony of a world we are told never existed. The pyramids are not alone. Across continents far from the Nile's banks, other stones rise in silence, their size and precision no less confounding. If Egypt's monuments are echoes of a forgotten civilization, then they are not solitary echoes. They are part of a chorus that stretches across the globe. A chorus of megaliths that refuses to fade. Travel first to Lebanon, to the ruins of Baalbek. Here lies the trilithon, 3 stones each weighing over 800 tons, set into a foundation wall with such precision that even today no modern crane could easily move them. The Romans later built temples on the site, but the trilithon was already ancient in their time. Who carved and positioned these giants? And why did later builders treat them not as raw material to be dismantled, but as sacred foundations to be preserved? The scale mirrors Giza, an inheritance too monumental to ignore, too enigmatic to explain. Cross oceans to the high plains of Bolivia. At Pumapunku, shattered blocks of andesite lie scattered like a broken puzzle. Their cuts are sharp, their angles precise, some forming interlocking joints that look as if machined. Archaeologists attribute them to the Tiwanaku culture around 500 CE. Yet the sophistication seems to exceed the tools known to that era. Just as in Giza, the technology implied by the stones does not match the story told about them. Then to Turkey, where the stones of Göbekli rise from the earth, carved pillars arranged in circles, each etched with animals in relief. Radiocarbon dating places them around 9600 BCE, millennia before the rise of agriculture or writing, long before the Egyptians ever dreamed of pyramids. Göbekli forces us to admit that advanced construction was possible at a time we thought humanity too primitive. If such a site could exist at the dawn of the Holene, could others have been lost in the floods and deserts that followed? And on Easter Island, the Moai stand gazing inland, colossal statues raised by a culture whose origins remain contested. Their size, their transportation, their purpose all raise the same questions that echo in Giza. How did they move them? Why did they carve them? Were these works of isolated genius or of a tradition spread across the globe? When viewed separately, each site seems like an anomaly, a local wonder. But when seen together, patterns emerge. Precision beyond expectation, scale beyond explanation, alignments to stars and solstices, silence where inscriptions should be. They resist our narratives, just as the pyramids resist being called tombs. Perhaps they are fragments of a common story, scattered by catastrophe, remembered only in stone. If so, then the pyramids are not uniquely Egyptian. They are nodes in a forgotten network, one that spanned oceans and ages. Whether by cultural diffusion, migration, or inheritance from a single global civilization, the similarities are too strong to ignore. The builders may not have known each other's names, but they spoke the same language, the language of megaliths, the language of stone. Consider how myths of floods and lost golden ages echo in every region where these monuments stand. Consider how geology confirms cataclysms at the end of the Ice Age. Consider how even genetics hints at ghost populations ancient peoples who vanished but left traces in our DNA. Archaeology, mythology, geology, genetics. Each discipline whispers of a world erased, a memory folded into silence. The stones across the world are not random. They are survivors, monuments left behind by cultures that knew the fragility of memory. The pyramids, Baalbek, Pumapunku, Göbekli, Easter Island, they all invite us to imagine a civilization greater and older than we have been taught, a civilization global in reach and now lost in time. And if stones can speak across oceans, perhaps they can also speak across senses. For in some monuments it is not only the sight, but the sound that matters. Resonance, vibration, acoustics, the hidden language of frequency may hold the next clue to what these builders truly knew. Close your eyes and step into the king's chamber. The air is heavy, the granite walls immense. Now whisper. Your voice carries unnaturally, lingering, folding back upon itself. Chant a low note, and the entire room seems to vibrate in sympathy, as if the stone itself were alive. This is not the ordinary echo of a cave. This is resonance carefully tuned, deliberately shaped. Acoustic engineers who have studied the chamber report standing waves around 110 Hz, a frequency known to affect the human body, inducing states of calm or trance. The granite, rich in quartz, resonates like a tuning fork, amplifying sound in a way limestone never could. The chamber's proportions, 10-meter long, 5-meter wide, 5.8, 8-meter high, align with harmonic ratios, creating a sonic environment as precise as a concert hall. Was this an accident, or was it intentional design, a technology of sound encoded in stone? This mystery is not confined to Egypt. In Malta, the hypogum of Halsafliani, a 5,000-year-old underground temple, produces resonance at nearly the same frequency, 110, 111 Hz. Visitors describe voices vibrating through their bones, sounds swirling as though guided by unseen hands. In Peru, the labyrinthine tunnels of Chavinduanta create acoustic illusions, whispering across chambers and amplifying conch shell horns into thunder. Around the world, ancient structures seem to manipulate sound as if their builders understood not just stone, but vibration. At Giza, resonance seems woven into the pyramid's very design. The grand gallery, with its soaring corbelled ceiling, channels sound upward like a vast organ pipe. The subterranean chamber, cut deep into bedrock, muffles sound as though swallowing it. The Queen's chamber resonates differently still, with narrow shafts aligned not for air but perhaps for frequency. Each chamber hums with a unique voice, as if the pyramid itself were an instrument designed to play notes we no longer know how to strike. What purpose could such acoustic design serve? Ritual is one answer. Chants and hymns may have been amplified to create altered states, connecting priests or initiates to the divine. Healing is another possibility. Modern research shows certain frequencies can affect brainwaves, even promote tissue regeneration. Or perhaps resonance was used not for the body, but for the earth itself. Some theorists suggest the pyramid was built to channel natural vibrations, seismic, electromagnetic, amplifying them in ways beyond our comprehension. The Egyptians left no texts describing such knowledge, but perhaps that is the point. If the pyramids were inherited, not built, then their resonance was not Egyptian, but older, a fragment of science preserved in stone. The silence of hieroglyphs may hide not ignorance, but remembrance. A choice to let the stones speak in their own language. Listen closely. Resonance is a universal tongue. Unlike words, it needs no translation. Unlike symbols, it cannot be erased. It is vibration, frequency, rhythm, constants as enduring as pi or phi. If the pyramids encode knowledge in mathematics, they may also encode knowledge in sound. This is the hidden language of resonance, one that binds Giza to Malta, Peru, and beyond. It suggests not isolated brilliance, but a tradition spread across continents, a global science of vibration, half lost, half remembered. And if stone can preserve sound, perhaps it can also preserve blood. For within the DNA of humanity lie traces of forgotten peoples, ghost populations who may have been the true architects of these mysteries. The silence of the pyramids is not broken only by stone or resonance, it is also carried in our blood. Modern genetics, with its maps of ancestry and migrations, has revealed that humanity's story is layered with shadows. Entire populations that once lived, thrived and vanished, leaving only faint echoes in our DNA. These are the ghost populations, remembered not in monuments or myths, but in the genetic code of their descendants. Studies of ancient genomes from North Africa and the Near East reveal threads that do not fit neatly into our current understanding. Some lineages appear to split from known populations tens of thousands of years ago, then rejoin later as though an entire people had existed in parallel, their history erased except for a trace in the double helix. Geneticists analyzing prehistoric remains often find signals that cannot be matched to any living group. Statistical whispers of a civilization gone missing. Consider the discoveries published in journals like Nature and Science. Ancient North. African remains carry genetic signatures connected to both sub-Saharan Africa and Eurasia, but also to something older, something unclassified. Some researchers suggest a population that flourished in North Africa before the Sahara became desert, a people who may have seen the rains and grasslands that carved the Sphinx. Others note the genetic imprint of basal Eurasians, an enigmatic branch that contributed to the first farmers of the Near East, yet seems to have no direct ancestors among known populations. These ghost peoples appear in models, but the names and faces behind them are gone. What if the builders of the pyramids were among them, a population whose memory has been erased from history, but whose legacy remains hidden in our blood? There, monuments would then be like their genes, fragments that endure while their names vanish. The Egyptians may have encountered these structures just as their DNA carried faint echoes of their makers, inheriting both body and stone without the story that tied them together. The parallels are striking. Just as myths across the world preserve fragments of lost civilizations, our genomes preserve fragments of lost peoples. Just as the inventory and dream stelae hint that the Egyptians found rather than built, our blood hints that our ancestry is deeper, stranger, more entangled than we imagine. Civilization is not a straight line, but a web with strands missing, torn away, leaving gaps we fill with silence or speculation. Genetics then becomes another kind of archaeology, not of stone but of flesh. It reminds us that we are haunted by those we have forgotten, that even when history erases a people, their presence lingers in our bodies. The pyramids may be the visible monuments of such a vanished group, just as ghost populations are the invisible monuments in our cells. If so, then the mystery of the pyramids is not only about Egypt. It is about humanity itself, about how much of our story has been erased and how much remains folded in shadow. The builders may be gone, their names lost, their faces unknown, but their legacy endures, carved in stone, coded in genes, waiting for us to listen. And if our very blood remembers what our histories forget, why do modern institutions work so? Hard to silence the stones? Why are discoveries beneath Giza sealed, anomalies dismissed, scrolls burned, doors unopened? Perhaps the greatest mystery is not what is lost, but why so much is kept hidden. The story of Giza is not only written in stone, it is also written in what we are not allowed to see. Again and again, discoveries that could shift the narrative have been sealed off, dismissed, or erased. It is a pattern so consistent that it begins to feel deliberate, as though the monuments are not the only things guarding their secrets, as though institutions themselves conspire to maintain silence. Consider the Osiris shaft. For decades it was closed to the public, its deepest chamber accessible only by special permit. Photographs of its strange granite box and smooth walls rarely appear in textbooks. When ground-penetrating radar in 2008 revealed geometric cavities beneath the plateau, officials quickly announced there was nothing there. When explorers in the 1930s described a chamber beneath the Sphinx, the excavation was backfilled, never to be reopened. Each time anomalies surface, they are buried again, literally or bureaucratically. The sealed doors discovered by Rudolf Gantenbrink's robot in 1993 were hailed as a breakthrough, proof of hidden architecture. Yet when exploration revealed a second door beyond the first, curiosity should have deepened. Instead, everything stopped. Access was revoked. The shafts remain unopened, and official statements assure us there is nothing of significance. But doors are not carved into stone for no reason. The refusal to look deeper is itself a revelation. Then there is the inventory stela, relegated to obscurity in the Cairo Museum, dismissed as a late fabrication because it contradicts orthodoxy, or the dream steelly interpreted as mere propaganda, despite its description of the Sphinx already half buried and forgotten, or the Coptic scroll reportedly destroyed in a fire before it could be translated. A pattern reminiscent of the library, of Alexandria, of Mayan Siddices burned by conquistadors, of tablets shattered in forgotten walls. Knowledge that might destabilize the narrative seems cursed never to survive. Skeptics say these silences are coincidence. They argue that archaeology must be cautious, that sensational claims distract from careful study. But caution can become denial, and denial can become suppression. When every anomaly is explained away, when every contradiction is labeled error or fraud, one begins to suspect the silence is not accidental, but strategic. Why guard the story so fiercely? Part of the answer is power. If the pyramids predate Egypt, then they are not purely Egyptian achievements, but global heritage that threatens national identity, tourism, and the authority of those who control the sites. Part of the answer is academic inertia. Careers, reputations, and textbooks rest on the established timeline. To admit the pyramids are older would collapse a framework built over centuries, and perhaps part of the answer lies in fear. If a forgotten civilization once rose and fell, what does that say about ours? If memory can be erased so completely, what does that mean for our own future? The conspiracy of silence is not absolute. Whispers escape. Old maps, dusty journals, photographs tucked into archives, data buried in technical papers. Each piece suggests that beneath the desert lies more than we are told, that the pyramids are not simply tombs, but keys to a chapter of human history deliberately hidden. The silence becomes its own evidence, a void as meaningful as the empty chambers within the Great Pyramid. Imagine standing at the plateau at night, the pyramids dark against the stars. You know that beneath your feet are chambers sealed, passages blocked, discoveries denied. Above you rise monuments, mute yet filled with numbers that speak of the cosmos. Around you, myths and legends echo of floods, forgotten builders, erased ages. And in that moment, the silence feels deliberate, as if the past itself has been locked away. But if the silence is deliberate, then we must ask the next question. If the Egyptians did not build the pyramids, and if authorities conceal what lies beneath, then who or what did? Were the builders merely human? Or could their knowledge have come from beyond the earth itself? The Great Pyramid looms against the night sky, its edges still aligned with uncanny precision to the 4 cardinal points. For centuries it has stood as a riddle, a challenge to explain how such perfection could emerge in an age of copper chisels and wooden sledges. The orthodox story tells us it was human labor, ingenuity and devotion to a pharaoh. But there are those who whisper another possibility, that human hands were not alone. In 1968, author Eric Fondon ignited controversy with his book, Chariots of the Gods. He suggested that ancient monuments across the world, from Nazca's desert lines to Sumer's myths of the Anunnaki bore traces of extraterrestrial influence. The pyramids, with their scale, geometry, and cosmic alignments, became a centerpiece of his theory. How could a Bronze Age society achieve what even modern engineers would struggle to replicate? Perhaps, he argued, they had help from beyond. The evidence is tantalizing. The Great Pyramid shafts align with Orion's belt and the pole star as they appeared not in Khufu's time, but thousands of years earlier. Its base encodes pi and phi constants that appear across the universe. Its scaling ratio reflects Earth's polar radius and equatorial circumference. These are not cultural symbols. They are cosmic ones, mathematics and astronomy written in stone, as if meant for any intelligence, human or otherwise, capable of measuring them. Why then is the pyramid devoid of hieroglyphs? Why does it not trumpet the glory of its supposed builder? Perhaps because its message was not meant for Egypt. Perhaps it was meant for the stars. Consider the Nazca lines in Peru, vast geoglyphs visible only from the sky. Their purpose elusive, their scale bewildering. Consider Puma Punku, where stones appear cut with machine-like precision. Consider Baalbek's Trilithon, whose blocks defy transportation even by today's cranes. Each site is a riddle, but together they suggest a pattern. As if scattered across the earth are monuments designed to be seen by eyes not bound to the ground. Ancient myths echo the same possibility. The Dune people of Mali tell of amphibious beings from the Sirius star system who brought knowledge of the heavens. The Book of Enoch speaks of watchers who descended to teach forbidden wisdom. The Sumerian tablets describe the Anunnaki, gods who shaped and instructed mankind. These stories, though separated by continents, converge on a single theme: contact with something other, something beyond. Skeptics dismiss such theories as fantasy, born of our desire to find the extraordinary. They remind us that no definitive artifact of alien origin has ever been unearthed, and yet the anomalies remain. The pyramids still stand as if designed to last geological ages, their precision undiminished, their silence unbroken. If they were built for human kings, they are excessive. If they were built for something more, they may still be serving that purpose. Imagine the pyramid not as a tomb, but as a beacon, a structure meant to communicate through mathematics, geometry, and alignment. To any intelligence advanced enough to measure, it says, "We knew the constants. We knew the stars. We knew the earth." Perhaps it was left as a marker, a meeting point, a memory carved not for Egyptians, not for us, but for a cosmic audience, whether extraterrestrial or merely human, guided by knowledge. Now lost, the pyramid's builders left us with a riddle that has endured longer than any language, longer than any empire. And if the possibility of other worldly influence feels unsettling, it is only because it forces us to accept that our history may be far stranger than we dare imagine. The question lingers: if not Egyptians, and perhaps not even humans as we know them, then who? The answer remains locked in stone. And as we approach the end of our journey, we return once more to the pyramids themselves, not as tombs, not as temples, but as memory. A library of stone waiting for us to listen. Dawn returns to the Giza plateau. The first light touches the apex of the Great Pyramid, spilling down its ancient slopes, as if awakening something that has watched since time before memory. The desert is quiet, but in that silence lies a presence, the weight of two. 3 million stones, each fitted with impossible care, each whispering a message too vast to be spoken aloud. We have followed this trail through erosion and mathematics, through stele and scrolls, through myths of floods and whispers of lost peoples. Each clue has folded back upon itself like layers of time pressed into the same bedrock. The Egyptians, meticulous record keepers, left no clear account of building these monuments. Instead, their own texts speak of discovery, restoration, and dreams. Their pharaohs claimed ownership, but the stones themselves resist. They are too old, too silent, too perfect. If the Egyptians did not build the pyramids, then who did? Perhaps a forgotten civilization erased when the Sahara turned to desert. Perhaps survivors of a global cataclysm, preserving their knowledge in geometry. Perhaps hands otherworldly, leaving monuments as markers across the earth. Each possibility opens a door, and behind each door lies another. What matters most is not which answer we choose, but that the question refuses to die. For the pyramids are more than monuments. They are repositories. They hold pi and phi, Earth's radius and circumference, alignments to Orion, and to the slow procession of the equinoxes. They hum with resonance at frequencies that shift the mind. They conceal doors sealed with copper pins, shafts that climb toward the stars, voids that radar detect but we are not allowed to enter. They are libraries written in stone, coded not in language but in constants, truths that outlast civilizations. And perhaps that is their true purpose. Not to glorify a king but to endure a forgetting, to wait in silence until we are ready to measure, to listen, to wonder. Civilizations rise and fall, scrolls burn, myths distort but stone endures. The pyramids stand as proof that memory can be preserved even when the storytellers vanish. Imagine them as time capsules planted in the desert, not for the Egyptians, not even for us, but for whoever comes next. Imagine a future world emerging from ruin, finding these structures still aligned to the stars, still whispering the same numbers, still challenging us to remember what was lost. In their silence lies patience. In their endurance lies intent. As the sun climbs higher, the pyramids gleam, ancient yet ageless. The Sphinx gazes east, scarred by rains long vanished. The plateau is alive with absence, an emptiness that is not void but presence withheld. We may never know who carved these monuments, but their message is clear. History is not what we think. Time is not a straight line. Memory can be buried, but it can also be preserved, waiting to be uncovered. The pyramids are not simply Egypt's. They are humanity's, or perhaps something even larger. They remind us that the past is deeper than we imagine, and that the future depends on whether we dare to listen. So as this journey ends, let the question remain. What if the Egyptians didn't build the pyramids? What if their stones are the voices of a forgotten world calling across millennia, asking us to remember? If you felt that call in the quiet of the night, if these mysteries have stirred something in you, consider joining us again. Like and subscribe and share where you are listening from tonight. And at what time? For the memory in stone is not yet finished. It waits patient as the desert, glowing in silence until the world is ready to remember.